This morning, I want to take you on a journey, and no doubt we'll continue this Sunday and the Sundays to come. Don't know how long. I'm going to allow the Spirit to direct me. But we're going to focus on exploring the Gnostic Gospels. The Gnostic Gospels. And today we're going to look at the odd couple of the Bible, Jesus and Judas. And I want to focus particularly on this particular issue, how to overcome the pain of betrayal consciously. How to overcome within yourself when you have been betrayed. There's probably no greater pain that we can experience than the pain of being betrayed. Would you agree? See, we expect our enemies to conspire against us. We expect our enemies to lie on us. We expect our enemies to plot and plan and attack us. But what we don't look for and what we do not expect is for the attack to come from our friends, our families, our soulmates. We don't expect them to betray us. We don't expect them to tell our deepest secrets. We do not expect them to do evil against us because we trust our family and we trust our friends. And we believe that our soulmates are for us. But if any of us have lived any length of time, you have had to deal with the pain of being betrayed by a close friend, by a husband or a wife, even by your children. It happens. Not only has it happened to us, but there are many of us who have been the betrayer. Amen? And when betrayal happens, when you are betrayed in an unexpected way, the pain goes deep into your heart and soul. Yes. You feel it like nothing else. It's like you're being blindsided and your world falls apart. The wound of betrayal paralyzes you. It becomes the means by which you experience spiritual death of your soul. Your soul shatters in many pieces. Amen. It is a mental death that you experience of your mind. You can't think. You're overwhelmed with emotions, confusion, chaos rules the mind. It even called a type of social death because you pull away and you no longer, the person that you love, the person you trust, you built up a resonance with them, a type of camaraderie with them, and now you don't know who to talk to. So many people choose just to pull away from relationships altogether. Like the song says, shot through the heart, and you're to blame. You give love a bad name. So the question we want to ask today is, how do you rise from being betrayed? How do you put your life back together? How do you get back soul fragments? How do you recover from a disturbed mind and find that peace? How do you even deal with the shattered pieces of a broken relationship? Can you pull it all back together again within yourself and with other people? It seems unlikely and maybe even seem impossible, and for sure, I know it may not always be practical, but I want you to know today that you can recover. You can get it back. You can rise and transcend above the pain of betrayal. However, it's going to require something from you. I want you to understand. It's going to require to overcome betrayal, because betrayal is not like any other type of attack, because it comes from someone that you love and that you trusted, that you believed in. So it's going to, if you want to get through it and get over it and not allow a root of bitterness to set up in your life and derail your life by what happens or happened, it's going to require something from you. It's going to require deeper insight from you. It's going to require guided interpretation of, what they would call intuition. Guided intuition from the Spirit. And it's going to require the evolution of your spiritual intelligence. The difficult problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created it. To put it in a biblical context, Romans 8:28 says this: all things work together for good to them who love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. In other words, all of life's events, whether pleasurable or painful, whether good or evil, are paths to divine enlightenment. Did you hear what I told you? Did you hear what Romans 28 is telling you? If all things work together for good, then all life's experiences that we do experience in this journey and drama of called our lives, whether they are pleasurable or painful, whether you interpret them as good or evil, whatever path and whatever experience we have are paths to divine enlightenment and have spiritual significance to help us to know ourselves. Because the ultimate reason why you are here is not to work for Walmart, Southwestern Bell, Grace Evangelical Baptist Church. The ultimate reason why you and I are here is to evolve spiritually. You are in earth school, and everything is a lesson to help push you to greater possibilities. You cannot understand, I want you to understand this, what I'm trying to say. We cannot understand nor interpret our own life journey, our own life story, only looking at it from a human perspective. You cannot understand even yourself by viewing your life from a human perspective. It requires a divine understanding of why we do what we have done, what was done to us, and even how to rise above it. The difficult problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created it. Therefore, I want to introduce to you probably the most classic act of betrayal that we in the Western Christian world have had to deal with, and that is Judas betraying Jesus with a kiss. I want to introduce you to the Gnostic Gospel of Judas. There's probably no greater villain in all of our known history than Judas Iscariot. Judas was one of the 12 disciples. Judas was the one who handled the money. Judas was the one who was indwelt or possessed by the devil that led him to not only steal from the money pot, but he also was the one who betrayed the Christ. He sold Jesus out to the religious rulers and to the Roman political leaders for 30 pieces of silver. Judas is the disciple who, after he had betrayed Jesus, Judas was the one who went and hung himself, overcome by guilt. The history behind the story of Judas has led many of us in the Western world to hate Judas. Very rarely you ever find parents naming their kids Judas. As a matter of fact, I've come to understand that in Germany, it's against the law to name your child Judas. It's like naming a girl Jezebel. You just don't do that. So the question we want to look at is that why do we hate Judas so much? Why do we hate Judas? And we not only hate Judas, we hate anybody who looks like Judas, who talks like Judas, who reminds us of the spirit of Judas. You know the reason why, one of the reasons why there's so much animosity between Christians and Jews is because when you look at pictures of Judas, they represent the portrayal and the image that Gentiles have against Jews. Because Judas, Jews. The Jews, according to the Christian story, what? They rejected Jesus. Judas betrayed Jesus. Judas handles the money. And therefore, in the course of time, Christian authors and Christian artists and Christian people identified or characterized Jews with very anti-Semitic, ugly remarks, and in the iconography or the images portrayed of Judas, they made him with a hook nose. They made him look with grotesque features as a way to inspire other European Gentiles to be anti-Semitic. Think about that. They called the Jews Christ killers. And this became the motivation of why the early church, Roman church, was very anti-Semitic toward Jews and Muslims. Very anti-Semitic toward Jews. Part comes from this whole Judas complex. Our interpretation, this is what I want to address today, our interpretation of Judas and Jesus, the odd couple of the Bible, reveals something very deep in how we look at evil, how we consider the nature of the world. See, how we read the Judas and Jesus story reveals how we understand the complexity of life drama. See, life is very complex. It's not simply good versus evil. Can be not described as black versus white, or right versus wrong, or saint versus sinner, or angels versus demons. You see, because we have this kind of simplistic understanding, it's either good or bad. It's either right or wrong. It's either this or that. Out of that way of thinking comes blame. Because we want it to be he's right, she's wrong when we're dealing with people who have divorce or problems in marriage. We want to be able to point the finger and blame this or that as the reason why life is the way it is. This comes out of the way in which we treat everything. You have the hero or you got to choose between the hero or the villain. But there's something about our consciousness whereby we are attracted to the villain. And the reason for that, we are attracted to Darth Vader. We are attracted to the vampire. Because there's something in us that says that the story is deeper than that. And what I want to do today, what I really want to do is to help us understand what we can learn from Judas. This is why I want to talk to you about, this is why I want to explain a little more deeper about a gospel, or the gospel of Judas. There's actually a book, or actually a gospel called the Gospel of Judas. How can Judas have a gospel? Matthew can have a gospel, Mark can have a gospel, Luke can have a gospel, John can have a gospel. But there is also a gospel of Judas. In 1978, the world woke up to the gospel of Judas. They discovered the gospel of Judas. The gospel of Judas is similar to a cache or a collection of books that were discovered in 1945 in Egypt, a city called Nag Hammadi. And these are what was termed the gospel, the Gnostic gospels. You have the gospel of Mary, you have the gospel of Nicodemus. Matter of fact, we tend to think you only have about 4 gospels, but actually there are 30-some, maybe even 200-some gospels. These were books that the Roman church or the Constantine established church banned from the Bible. They did not want you, the average churchgoers, to know about these other gospels. And therefore, they persecuted people known as Gnostics. The Gnostics, you heard me say, the Gnostics were people who were seekers of knowledge, not just intellectual knowledge. They wanted to experience God. They wanted to know God experientially. They wanted to have a intuitive, mystical insight. They wanted to experience that within themselves. So to the Gnostics, God wasn't a being out there, though they didn't deny that. God was a force, a power within. And every one of us are given a spark. We have within us a spark of the light of God within us, as it says in the Gospel of John, chapter 1. And so the Gnostics were early Christians who interpreted the life of Jesus differently than the imitation church or the politically established church. And that politically established church did not like the Gnostics because they wanted to control the minds of people for political and economic gain. The Gnostics didn't see it that way. And so the political church that even that we are a part of, because every church that you basically see is following the same line of thinking of the Roman church, the political church, even the Protestant church, following that same line of thinking. What they did was, they, with the power of the Roman military behind them, they persecuted the early Christians called Gnostics. Now the Gnostics, the people that I'm talking about, Gnostics, did not call themselves that. That's what the political church called them. What they called themselves were Christians. You see, many of us think that, I'm not aware of the fact that at the very beginning, Christianity was not one. There were many Christianities. What we have been exposed to, based upon crude marketing and methods to control the minds of people, we have been cut off from other views on the Christ. What I'm doing today is attempting to expand our consciousness so we can see a broader view of Christianity. Now, you're free to choose and follow what you want to, but at least you need to know the options. Now, what the early church did was they not only killed, they truly did kill by the sword those who had dissenting views of Christ, but they burned their libraries and their books. What happened was, to avoid the destruction of their revelation of Christ, they buried their books. They hid their knowledge. In 1945, in Egypt, in a place called Nag Hammadi, the books were found. And ever since then, it has put the traditional church and its scholars in uproar. It has put them in uproar. Because the version of Christianity that you and I have been raised in does not correspond to the earliest of Christians. So you have to stop and think sometimes. If a church that we know as the Vatican has a 5-mile long library of information they have stolen and collected and kept. And that's the oldest church in the world, some 1,200 years old. They are the ones who actually created a lot of universities. And they have sequestered information. And ask yourself, when you're getting ready to cast somebody to hell, you're getting ready to tell somebody to go to hell, or you're pointing a finger at somebody and say, you don't know the Bible, ask yourself, what do you really know? Because we're not all dealing with full knowledge. We're all, including me, we're all dealing with partial knowledge. But there's a way to get knowledge that goes beyond what you can read. And that's what the Gnostics are about. God is in you, as Paul would say, one of the chief Gnostics. Christ in you, the hope of glory. So, what am I trying to say here today? We want to enter into the gospel of Judas. So, who was Judas? Now, I have given you the story, the outline of the life of Judas. Not many scriptures in the Bible that actually tell you a lot about Judas, but it's enough. But what is Jesus' relationship to Judas? Judas' relationship to Jesus at a deeper level. Let's ask this question. We know that Judas betrayed Jesus. We know Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. We know that Judas hung himself, committed suicide. Let's ask some deeper questions here. Jesus is the Son of God. He knows and has insight on everything, if not most things. Correct? Who chose Judas to be his disciple? Jesus. Why would Jesus choose a man who, by his own testimony, he says, there's one that is a devil. There's one who eats with me and will kick up his heels against me. If you are the Son of God, why would you choose a person who you know will betray you? Think about it. On the night when Jesus was captured by the Roman soldiers, the Roman soldiers, first of all, had to use Judas to what? To identify, that's absolutely right, to identify who was Jesus. Now, first of all, let's say that you're not talking about a large city, you know. And so you would ask the normal question to answer, well, didn't y'all see him run around teaching and everything? I mean, you should know what he looked like. Why do you need Judas? Beyond that, why would Judas need to identify Jesus with a kiss? He's a disciple. Just say, there he is. He identified him with a kiss. I'm going to answer these questions in a few minutes. And what would be, here's the bigger point. What would be the gospel or the story of Jesus if there were no Jesus? Now let that sink in for us. And how we understand and answer those questions will give each and every one of us significant understanding of what it means when you go through a betrayal, when you go through a suffering, when you go through pain. It'll give you insight on how to deal with the pain and suffering that comes through betrayal. Whether that betrayal is by a friend, by a spouse, or who you call a soulmate, or somebody in your family. So if Jesus, with foreknowledge, chose Judas to be a disciple, how can you possibly create a life, an experience, where you will avoid, without foreknowledge, whereby you would avoid hurt and pain, suffering, by the hands of somebody who you trusted? Let me say one other thing about soulmates. You see, we live in this world where we have this idea about soulmates. Soulmates are people that we are eternally tied to by the bond of love. What I'm telling you today in the story of Jesus and Judas, Judas was a soulmate of Jesus. Sometimes your soulmate is your soulmate because they are in your life, because you have a bond with them. And they are here to perform in your life what your soul needs to become what God has called you to be. In the Gospel of Judas, we are told, and I'm going to show it this afternoon, as a matter of fact, the documentary on the Gospel of Jesus. I wish some of you would come. You don't have to come, but I'm saying, but if you really want to grow in your knowledge and expand your conscience, you got to come and see and hear what this gospel is all about. It's a whole documentary on it. But anyway, let me go into it a little bit. In the Gospel of Judas, Judas is not the villain. Judas is the hero. Because there could be no gospel story if it were not for Judas. Jesus could not be Jesus if he did not have a Judas that becomes the means by which he would go to the cross. In the Gospel of Judas, Jesus tells Judas, or asks Judas, because Judas was the most committed, the most conscious in the Gospel of Judas now. Judas is the most committed, the most conscious of the disciples. He knew Jesus better than all the others. He saw who Jesus was before all the others in the Gospel of Judas. And therefore, Jesus asked Judas to accept the role of being his betrayer. You see, anybody couldn't accept this role because to become the betrayer means that you have to give up your social status. You have to give up praise. You have to give up being honored and loved by humanity. As a matter of fact, you will become the emblem of everything that's evil, everything that's negative, everything that's bad. And forever, you would be the perpetual boogeyman in the minds of all the people. Judas accepted the responsibility or the call to be that person because Jesus needed somebody who could take, as Jesus would become the most loved and the most beloved and the most famous and the most good and emblem of holiness, he needed the contrast, somebody who can be the emblem of all that is evil. Judas accepted the call. You see, I would understand is that because for many of us in here to be the great people that we think we are, to achieve the house that we live in, because many of y'all live in real nice homes and you have real nice jobs, drive nice cars, and have a nice, beautiful, manicured life. Somebody had to be the opposite of you. In order to have beautiful flowers and all this beautiful life on this planet, somebody had to die. In order to have a beautiful flower like a rose, somebody had to be the fertilizer. Many of our young men that I talk to, that I run into at the university where I teach, They have issues with their dad. They have an issue with their father. Their father was an alcoholic. Their father was, they would say, ran women. Or their father was nothing that to be admired. He wasn't like Obama. He wasn't like Jesse Jackson, or somebody that is famous and glorified. And I had to remind them in their pursuit of intelligence and their nice clothing, the suit that they wear and looking good, I had to tell them, you could not be who you are if your father was not who he was. He became the contrast that inspired you to be a better man. Think about it. Judas knew what Jesus was calling him to, and he accepted the call. The other thing we discovered in the Gospel of Judas that's so profound and so beautiful is that the reason why Judas had to betray Jesus with a kiss is because Jesus had a characteristic, according to the Gnostics and everything, had a characteristic of being able to shape shift. He could be, because the Gnostics understood that Jesus or the Christ Spirit is in all things. And Jesus, as an example of that, he could appear as a plant, he could appear as an animal, he could appear as a woman, he could appear as a child, he could appear in any form that people can see him. In other words, the Gnostics took a different turn or interpretation on the Jesus story. And therefore, Judas was the only one that could see and know and see the Christ in everything. That's why he was so great, because he was not restricted by literalism. He could see the Spirit of Christ. And therefore, he says, the one who I kiss is the one who is Jesus. That's what the Gospel of Judas reveals. In other words, Judas is the Bible's dark night. In order for many of you to feel good about yourself, but yet at the same time don't want to take responsibility to know your shadow of yourself, because you cannot stand to see your own sin. You cannot stand to deal with your own guilt and responsibility. That's why we blame other people. And like I said before, that when someone points their finger at you and blames you for something, what's pointing back at them? Their own three fingers are pointing back at them. You see, it's easy to blame and find fault and to say, you're the reason why I'm like this. It's your fault, mama. It's your fault, daddy. If you had been different, if you had been a better mother or father, if you had been a better husband or wife, if you had not hurt me, I would not be doing this. My life would be better and everything. It's very easy for us to blame and find fault in others. But that's because we live in a world that teaches us that it's this or that, right or wrong. There are no shades of gray. There's no deeper purpose of why evil exists. We want to live in a world where there is no evil. But I'm going to tell you something. If there was no evil, there could be no evolution. If there was no pain, there would be no drive for joy. If there was no suffering, there could be no drive for pleasure. Therefore, the darkness in us is nothing more than the Spirit pushing us to be more better. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to tell you that this is how we have to interpret Jesus and Judas. Jesus and Judas, or say, as Jesus is a symbol of the higher self. Let me slow down here a little bit. I really want you to get this. As Jesus is an archetypal symbol, Jesus is the symbol. Jesus is an archetype that lives within you. You are Jesus. As Jesus is a symbol of your higher self and its potential, Jesus is a symbol of the divine in you descending itself into third-dimensional matter, taking on flesh, having put the divinity, having put on flesh, come into the evil, chaotic world. Jesus comes down, the Spirit comes down, takes on flesh to become, Jesus is a model of what we can become. Therefore, God becomes man in order that man might become God. Judas is a symbol of the lower self. Jesus is a symbol of the higher self. Judas is a symbol of the lower self, the ego. The ego that will sell his mama, that will lie, cheat, and steal to have its way. Your Judas, you are Judas. You have a Judas in you. It's called your ego. And therefore, that Judas betrays your true purpose. Your ego seeks to stop you from being that. Therefore, Judas tries to stop Jesus. But instead of your ego stopping you, it becomes the means by which the greater you is crucified, or to say, the higher part is crucified, so it can become even more greater. You cannot have evolution without evil. Now again, Judas, in all its ways, in us, is our attempt to sabotage our higher self. And once it does that, we betray ourselves, we kill ourselves with everything we can think of, because without which, if we not do that, we could not find ourselves. Think about it, brothers and sisters. At the time when you have done the most despicable thing, when you have worked against your best interests, and life falls apart, and you are left on the ground feeling guilty, shame, it's at that moment where something speaks to you, and you learn something about yourself that you didn't know. And it becomes the point of view from which you can rise from. Like Les Brown said, if I fall, let me fall on my back. Because if I can look up, I can get up. So the very thing that causes us so much pain, ourselves, our own ego, becomes the means that releases the power of God within us. I want you to notice, both Jesus died as a result of Judas' betrayal, and Judas died. Both of them died. The only difference is Jesus rose. There could be no Jesus if there were no Judas. What this is all about? It's a contradiction. The cross itself is a contradiction of two intersecting lines. It's a symbol of death, the cross is. That because it is the means by which we transcend. So what I'm saying to you, yes, all things do work together for good to them who love God, to them for the cause according to his purpose. The very people that cause you pain and suffering, who have done you wrong, from the spiritual perspective, these are the very people who have been called by your soul contract to enter into this world, to shake you up out of your comfort, out of your convenience, out of your life, to cause you to die to yourself, that faith may rise in you. As the Apostle Paul says in Galatians 2, verse 20, I, ego, Judas, my little ego, I have been crucified with Christ. I, ego, no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Sometimes you have to die to yourself in order to discover your higher self, your higher partner. We descend as gods to become human. We ascend as humans to become God. At the cross, at the contradiction of my life, when Judas and Jesus meet on that inevitable road, at the cross, is where I first saw the light. And the burden of my heart rolls away. It was there by faith I received my sight. And now I am happy all the day. And so the point I'm trying to say to you is this. If in that contradiction of the friend who betrays his friend, it's in that contradiction where you betray yourself, you sabotage your life. We do things. It's at that point when you can put it together and see how good and evil work together in the plan of God, that's when you can say, as Joseph said, they meant it for evil, God meant it for good. And when we can see the good that has been manifested in our lives, not good because I'm going to get a job, not because I'm going to get some more money, not because I'm going to get another girlfriend. No, the greater good that I have become a better man. I have become a better woman. I see my own shadow. I see my own fault. And therefore, you don't have to go around blaming other people. As a matter of fact, you say, I want to thank you. Because if I had not fallen, I would not have understood how great I can rise. If you had not broken my heart, I would not have found my true heart in God. If you had not done me wrong, I would not discover how much love I actually have in my life. What is this all about, brothers and sisters? What I'm trying to tell you is this. What does all this mean? Everything that you have been through, everything that you are going through, every person that has betrayed you, or every person that you have betrayed, from the higher divine perspective, it's all good because it's all God working his righteous will in your life. What is necessary is that you have to, instead of cursing the experience, instead of cursing the person, before you speak, before you interpret, you ask God, why? Show me why. Show me what I'm supposed to learn from this person. Because trust me, from this event, because trust me, if God did not will it and you are his child, it could not happen. Therefore, it must be a divine purpose that God is trying to release something out of me that was buried deep inside of me. And this is why when we read 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 12, what do we see? We see Jesus in this verse, knowing that his hour had come, having departed from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end, and that included Judas. That's why Jesus could love Judas, because Judas was fulfilling divine prophecy. He could not become the Messiah that we know him to be if Judas had not become the betrayer that he asked him to be. You see, the second thing, after Judas left, what did Jesus do? Knowing that suffering and pain is getting ready to happen, because Jesus saw things from an eternal perspective of the cause and the source, and not from the lower perspective of the ego and effect. He got up, took off his robe, girded a towel about him, and he went and washed the feet of the disciples. Because the essence of our faith is not revenge, it's not fault finding, it's not trying to one up ourselves over the other. The essence of our faith is service with humility and love. And what the disciples did not do, because they were stuck in ego consciousness, they did not wash each other's feet. You know why? Because they were too proud. Because that was the work of the servant. And who was the servant? The hidden servant, the dark knight in the story. Who was the one that obeyed the call of the Messiah? It was Judas. It was Judas. And that's why Jesus asked them, do you understand what I have done? Brothers and sisters, the sad truth is that when we go through a difficult moment, the thing is we don't understand. We ask God, why you do that to me? Why you allow that to happen to me? because we don't understand. God can take a crooked stick and hit a straight leg. God can use your pain and suffering to accomplish his greatest achievement. God can use evil to push you to greater evolution and knowledge of self. I hope this message on Judas can allow you to go deeper in analyzing the problems of your life from just a simple perspective of good versus evil. Understand, in order for life to move and life to be, both experiences are loved and come from the Creator. Good and evil, darkness and light, right and wrong, saints and sinners. All things do work together to them who are the called according to his purpose. Because they see God in the fertilizer and in the flower, in the sugar, honey, and iced tea, and the sugar. I hope you one day can raise your spiritual intelligence to see life more complex than what we have been taught to see life. God bless you.